Good morning and welcome to this edition of Inside Cottonwood with Ron Corbin, your city manager. Today we have two great guests. We have our Chief of Police, Gesell. Welcome.
Thank you.
And we have Commander Gareth Braxton. I almost forgot again. We were just talking about that. So welcome. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
Thank you. And
today's topic is really about our neighborhood police officer program. So since I've been here, I'm trying to learn about all that the city has to offer. And this is, I think, one of those unique programs that makes us special and provides great customer service and provides a contact in our community for our police department to get more familiar and to create relationships. And so, Chief or Commander, do you guys want to kind of tell us what the program is and what it offers to the community?
Sure. Why don't I start? And you hit on the key word, which is relationships. And policing in this country is, that's really the cornerstone of modern day American policing, is the relationships, the old school thought of, or philosophy of, we drive around in cars and we wait to respond. Those days hopefully are long gone in most police departments across the state. Clearly, they're long gone in Cottonwood. We have a number of programs that are designed to build and foster and sustain positive relationships with the community, and they, it's an exponential magnifier for public safety and creating safe environments, and quite frankly, contributing to the great quality of life that we have here in Cottonwood. So the Neighborhood Officer Program is one of those programs. Long-winded intro.
No, I agree. It's a great program, which I think does, it's not small town, where you don't really get to meet everybody, where you sit in your office or in your cars. You guys get out in the community and you, instead of calling just a phone number, you can call the person responsible for your area. I think it's a great program. Let's not undersell it, because, bigger cities, they can't do that. And don't always have, and even when they do, it's a much bigger area, and the response isn't quite what it is here. So how does it work?
So the program, and you mentioned big cities, and I will say that in larger cities, and the general public would not know this, but larger cities are generally divided into sectors, grids, or commonly referred to as beats.
Beats, okay.
And the beats, officers work that particular beat. Any, a specified given period of time, could be a month, could be 3 months, could be a year before they're eligible to rotate to another shift. So there's some continuity there. In smaller communities like Cottonwood, we're too small to have beats. So our officers generally are spread out throughout the city, and they respond accordingly to calls for service. So the Neighborhood Officer Program kind of bridges that gap where we divide the city. In our city, it's 9 different, what we call neighborhoods. And it's, quite frankly, it's areas of ownership. It's areas that officers can go into, make those connections, really concentrate on building those relationships, helping the residents and business owners and managers solve problems and work collectively together. And it does absolutely give you that face. It puts that face behind the badge in this case, where without a program like this, you would have one option. That's to call the main number and talk to a dispatcher that you'll never probably see or meet, and get several different officers perhaps every time you call. So it's really kind of that conduit to bolster the relationships and help the community in solving problems.
Commander, did you want to add anything about the program? I'm assuming you're responsible for the program, the officers, you help run it?
Yes, and one of the great things about the program is that it does just that. It encourages the officers and the community members and business owners to problem solve collaboratively. And we view ourselves as ambassadors for the city as one department. And so traditionally, people would look to law enforcement as the end-all be-all related to criminal activity or quality of life issues, but as one ambassador for the city, we can bring those resources together, whether it's from Parks and Rec, community development, public works, and if need be, law enforcement. But we encourage the officers to work collaboratively with the business owners and community members to find out what's the best solution, and a sustainable solution at that.
It sounds like you're talking about being proactive. So this program isn't just about responding to crime, it's about being proactive to prevent crime. Is that accurate?
Correct. And some of the issues that we may typically get involved in that are proactive are crime prevention through environmental design. And that's a program where officers will go out and look at different businesses or neighborhoods and identify, well, this may be a perfect place for car burglaries or a perfect place for other quality of life issues, where the officer can make suggestions to business owners and community members to help reduce the attractiveness of crimes that could be committed in those areas.
Chief, when we talk about preventing crime, I know that there's a program, because some of the business owners have asked about trespassing. So when they have people that are unwanted in their businesses or they're having issues with, how do you trespass somebody? How do you contact the neighborhood police officer program to get the help you need?
So that's a great segue. We have another program called Safe Shopper or Safe Community. It's the same program. Originally it was geared towards commercial business properties, but we had such interest from our residents that some private landowners also wanted to enroll in the program. And essentially the Safe Shopper, Safe Community program, it's a short form that the owner or the manager of a business fills out, that provides or essentially gives authority to the police to kind of keep an eye on their property, and gives us the ability to focus on what I call order maintenance crimes, like loitering, solicitation. Most common form of solicitation would be a panhandler on private property. This doesn't apply to public property, where there's a constitutional right in most cases to do that. But on private property, there are obviously ownership privileges and rights in our country, and we essentially enter this agreement where we become the extra eyes and ears for those business owners and private private landowners.
Can you give, Chief or Commander, can you give an example of where this has worked? Have you had any successes that just kind of stand out above the others, where you've helped prevent or solve problems or help a business remain safe, or a neighborhood reduce crime? Is there any examples that you guys can think of?
I can say collectively, when I started here 3.5 years ago, particularly order maintenance crimes, that was really the #1 concern that was brought to my attention, to focus on reducing those. People just didn't feel safe. Because policing is not just about crime statistics, it's about creating safe environments for everyone. And once we instituted particularly a number of these programs, but Safe Shopper, and we had just a phenomenal response from the business community, because I didn't know what type of response we would get. And I still to this day will get community and business owners that will say thank you very much for creating those safe environments and reducing those types of order maintenance crimes on their property. So collectively, I can say that that's probably one of the most frequent comments we get. And we subscribe to the broken windows theory. If you're not familiar with the broken windows theory, is essentially if we don't address these order maintenance crimes, then it creates these unsafe environments for far more heinous and serious crimes to occur, which I've seen in different communities. I've seen that phenomenon carry itself out. So we take it very seriously. Our officers, that's our culture, to focus on the little things, ideally many times without enforcement action. And that's the beauty of a program like Safe Shopper. Is I want to say in the 3 years that we've installed that program, we've had less than 10 arrests.
Really?
Because the problem is it's about prevention. So once the word gets out that these activities are not allowed on these given private parcels, then that proactive measure results in just an increase in safe environments.
Wow, sounds like a great program. So we're going to go to a break. When we come back, let's talk about how you get a hold of these people, or how you learn who your officer is when we come back. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right, we'll be back in just a second with this edition of Inside Cottonwood.
This is Bruce Morrow, Transportation Manager for Cottonwood Area Transit. Remember, we cover the entire Verde Valley and Sedona. Cottonwood Area Transit has you covered wherever you want to ride in the Verde Valley, all day, every day. Take Cottonwood Area Transit through Clarkdale, Verde Village, and from 26 locations in Cottonwood. With Verde Links, it's a quick and easy trip to Sedona every day. Don't forget our connectors to Camp Verde. Visit cottonwoodaz.gov for Cottonwood Area Transit and take a seat. Let's go ride.
Do you feel like people are avoiding you? Don't be a dreaded spreader. Protect yourself and those around you from flu. Here's 3 things you should do. Get a flu vaccine each year. Take everyday preventive actions to stop the spread of germs, like covering coughs and sneezes and washing your hands, and stay home if you're sick. If you do get the flu, contact a healthcare professional right away and take flu antivirals if prescribed. Don't be a dreaded spreader. Take 3 steps to fight flu.
Good morning and welcome back to this edition of Inside Cottonwood. We have our Chief of Police and one of our commanders. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. And we're talking about our Neighborhood Officer Program. When we left, we talked about some of the great successes we have, including a reduction in crime overall and the broken window. Thank you. I didn't know what that was. And then, but how do you get a hold of them, or how do you figure out who your officer is?
Great question. There's 2 ways you can find out who your neighborhood officer is. And again, we've divided the city up into 9 what we call neighborhoods, areas of ownership, which we talked about before. But you can go to the city's website, very simple, and then you click police. And then one of the subheadings under the police page is Find Your Neighborhood Officer. If you click that, it'll show a map of the city. We'll have all the neighborhoods there, and it'll also have hyperlinks and photos of your neighborhood officers. The second way to do it, the city has an app. We've had an app up and running for the last couple of years. It's called Civic Mobile. Civic Mobile, and if you go to the App Store, you don't type in City of Cottonwood because you won't find it. Type in Civic Mobile, and then you can find Cottonwood, and it's a very, very helpful app that provides a direct link to other city services, including the police, and one of the little tiles does say Find Your Neighborhood Officer.
Very nice. Oh, okay, let's talk about a couple other programs we have, including one you wanted to talk about, Commander, which is Walkabout. What is that?
Yeah, and so that's part of the Neighborhood Officer Program, and that's one of the things that we encourage our officers to do, which is to get out of your vehicle, go up to doors, and go up to businesses and make contact with the owners and the residents. And we provide them with one of these brochures which explains that they're assigned to this particular neighborhood, which is where they're making contact. And it also has an email address and phone numbers for how to contact the officers and what types of reasons they should be contacting their neighborhood officer. So it's very informative, it's very personable. It is a non-traditional law enforcement contact, so we're not making a traffic stop or making an arrest or responding to a crime that's just been occurred. This is a very consensual, casual encounter, and you'd be surprised at the responsiveness we've received from various residents. I mean, just personally having done it, I've been invited in, had a conversation with a Hispanic family and my limited Spanish, but it's been pretty phenomenal, the success we've had. But we just want to encourage our officers and the residents alike that if you see an officer coming up with a brochure, they're truly there to help solve any problems or conditions within your neighborhood that may be present. So
I can tell you that when I'm out in the community and I see your officers in uniform eating, going into, probably can't endorse any one restaurant, but there's a couple that I frequent, and you know, seeing them come in and order their food or eat in the community and versus sitting in their car, I think it makes a big deal. It goes back to what you were talking about, Chief. Relationships. It's getting a comfort, so there's mutual respect on both sides, those in uniform towards those not, and those not in uniform towards those that are in uniform. You know, given the world we live in today, it always, you know, makes me a little nervous as a city manager, making sure that my community's safe and that our officers are safe and respected. And the work you guys do in building these relationships goes a very long way. Anything else you wanted to add about the Walkabout program, Chief?
Well, to button up the neighborhood officer program, I would like to say that it's a paradigm shift for any department that embarks on a program like the neighborhood officer program. we have officers that have been career officers for 20 plus years that are used to handling problems now a certain way, and many times for instance, this program doesn't remove if you need a police officer now, you don't call your neighborhood officer, you call 911 or the non-emergency depending on circumstance. But the paradigm shift, we're still working on it internally, because it takes years of continuous focus of, okay, when we receive the information, there's a problem, even as managers, I'll catch myself doing it. Well, let's handle this right now, and many times it's better to involve the neighborhood officer and let them help and take that ownership and solve that problem. And on the flip side, it's also, this is a great opportunity for us to get the word out to the community. And I have had many comments, positive comments on this program from the community, but making sure the community is aware. And I've also had commentary where they have no idea that we have this program. So we're very grateful for the opportunity to come on and talk about it, as we'd like to get more of that involvement from the community.
You reminded me now, I don't have all the information, but we'll have it on the city's website. I think you were invited by Councilwoman Aaron to do a community gathering she does over the library. I think once a month or so she does, to talk about this program also. Am I speaking correctly? Is she going to have you come over and people could actually come up and ask you about the program?
Sure, absolutely, yeah. I'm open for any questions, as I am for any community group, but yeah, I think this will be a center point in that discussion.
Awesome, very good. One of the other programs that I wanted to ask about, because my kids, I have a couple kids that are grown now, and one of the neat parts of going to school that's different from when I went to school was having police officers in the schools. And it wasn't because it was, there was bad things happening, but building that relationship early. Now, for me, it's for a couple. One is to build that relationships and respect for the men and women in uniform. But also, I got to be honest with you, it's about recruiting, because I think being a police officer is a great profession. So getting people to understand what you guys do, and that you are people, approachable. It's kind of like the kids who see the teacher in the grocery store for the first time and realize, oh my goodness, they shop. So getting that exposure early is important, building those relationships again. So what kind of officer or school resource officer program do we have here in Cottonwood?
So we have 2 school resource officers currently. One is funded through a Safe Schools grant and assigned to Mingus Union High School. The other officer is temporarily assigned, now back to patrol, but formerly he was assigned to the Cottonwood Oak Creek School District. And so we're fortunate to have both of those positions, but it really takes a unique individual to go into the high school, or any school for that matter, and form those bonds or those relationships, as Chief alluded to, because you're right, those first impressions are critical, and you really don't have an idea for someone's background until you have that interaction. And so some may have had negative consequences with law enforcement, or maybe their family members had. And so having an officer there on school, the full time that school's in session, really provides an opportunity, a unique opportunity, to have that positive interaction and to see more than just a badge in a uniform, or an officer driving down the street in a patrol car. And the officers we've had historically have been phenomenal. We've had very positive feedback, not just from the staff, but the parents and the students alike. And we're just very fortunate to have those kind of relationships. But it does serve an important role, particularly within our community.
Very nice. Chief, anything you want to add before we go to commercial break on the school resource officer?
We're sitting next to a former school resource officer. I just wanted to point that out.
I'm assuming he was very successful, I'm going to guess, given his rise in the ranks. Yeah. All right, we'll come back in just a minute. We're actually going to talk about a couple issues that face our modern police force, and some of the responses that we've done here that the Chief and Commander have helped keep our community safe, and some of our successes. So come back and we'll learn about what those are.
This is Bruce Morrow, Transportation Manager for Cottonwood Area Transit. Remember, we cover the entire Verde Valley and Sedona. Cottonwood Area Transit has you covered wherever you want to ride in the Verde Valley, all day, every day. Take Cottonwood Area Transit through Clarkdale, Verde Village, and from 26 locations in Cottonwood. With Verde Links, it's a quick and easy trip to Sedona every day. Don't forget our connectors to Camp Verde. Visit cottonwoodaz.gov for Cottonwood Area Transit and take a seat. Let's go ride.
Do you feel like people are avoiding you? Don't be a dreaded spreader. Protect yourself and those around you from flu. Here's 3 things you should do. Get a flu vaccine each year. Take everyday preventive actions to stop the spread of germs, like covering coughs and sneezes and washing your hands, and stay home if you're sick. If you do get the flu, contact a healthcare professional right away and take flu antivirals if prescribed. Don't be a dreaded spreader. Take 3 steps to fight flu.
Welcome back to this edition of Inside Cottonwood. I'm Ron Corbin, your city manager. We have our chief of police and one of our commanders. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. We've been talking about the neighborhood officer program. We've talked about the school resource officer program. Both are proactive programs about creating relationships to help prevent crime and respond at the local level with familiar faces. Awesome programs. But I want to talk about, for just a few minutes that we have left, about some of the stuff I've read in the paper or heard on the news lately. Here in the county, we've had some, the officers, both you and the sheriff and others, have had some good successes on some drug busts, fentanyl and some other issues. Is there anything you guys can share with us about what we're doing or some of the successes we've had? And then maybe I also want to talk about if someone wants to report a drug issue with they seen or suspect, or if they want help. Do you have any resources you can share? So maybe Chief, we'll start with you.
Yeah, and maybe Gareth, you can handle the second piece. As Gareth's last assignment was in PANT, which is our narcotics task force that works drugs enforcement throughout the county, which is an invaluable resource that the City of Cottonwood and our department are active participants in. Drugs in general, I'll start out with the bad news, is Yavapai County ranks one of the highest number of overdose deaths in the state, per capita, obviously. Not a good statistic. One, we get plenty of positive statistics on our tourism industry and our wine industry. This is one that obviously we'd like to not have.
Right.
And those are mainly attributed to opioid overdoses, although they're generally a mix of illegal substances, methamphetamine, heroin, and a lot of people have heard of the drug synthetic opioid called fentanyl, which is extremely, extremely dangerous. So just recently, the latest article that came out on a seizure that we made, one of our canine officer stopped a vehicle that had, how many pounds?
It was a kilo, so about a little over 2 pounds.
A kilo of fentanyl, which is enough conservatively to kill over 500,000 people.
Wow.
And the irony behind it, the public doesn't hear a lot when they hear about fentanyl is, I believe there's an inference that fentanyl is somehow substituted for something that the consumer wants, the drug addict wants, unknowingly. And the reality is that there's a market, as dangerous as fentanyl is, the high is so enticing to addicts that they will risk killing themselves to chase it. And that's the reality, is the drug dealers, and particularly Mexican cartels, they know this, and it's a supply and demand issue. So as long as there's a demand, there will be a supply, and most of this almost exclusively comes over our southern border. We happen to be fortunate to interdict this load on this side. They've had similar successes on the other side of Mingus Mountain, Prescott Valley, Prescott and the county have had significant seizures of fentanyl and just recently methamphetamine, which I will also say is making a comeback nationwide as drug trends ebb and flow.
Right.
And I think what we're seeing now is the movement away from opioids back to methamphetamine, which is extremely alarming from a public safety standpoint. Is the criminal piece to that is much more violent, and our men and women in blue obviously are the first ones on the front line that have to deal with them.
Right. Well, I really appreciate their work, doing what they can to keep that off our streets and keep our communities safe. Commander, so what are we doing?
So a lot of it, as Chief mentioned, is interdiction, and that's working our 3 major thoroughfares within the county, which are Interstate 17, Interstate 40, and Interstate 93. But locally, kind of a localized effort, is we're part of the Partners Against Narcotics Trafficking Task Force, which is a multi-agency task force designed to reduce and eliminate drug trafficking within specific areas of the county. So if a resident or member of the community had concerns or questions about suspected drug activity, they could report it to the Cottonwood Police Department or the Partners Against Narcotics Trafficking Task Force, and then those officers, as part of that task force, would go out and investigate those types of crimes. And a lot of what we've seen is that we know that we may get a end product here, let's say within the city of Cottonwood, but almost all inevitably there's a larger tie to a larger organization or drug trafficking organization. And so the biggest thing that we could emphasize to the community is, if you think it's suspicious, we'd rather get the call and find out it be nothing, or find out that we have to do a little bit more investigation.
So it goes back to the adage that's been around for a while now: see something, say something.
Right? Absolutely.
All right, well, very good. So maybe this isn't the right group, but if someone was having trouble and they wanted to make a phone call, either one of you know, I'm kind of putting you on the spot, know who they might call to get some help. Of course, if they're in the middle of an event where they're having problems, 911 is the best number, no reason to take a chance. But does the community have any resources that either one of you are aware of to help those?
We do. We're very fortunate in that respect, and to counter the negative commentary that I started with on the number of overdoses, our partnerships with mental health, particularly with Spectrum on this side of the Yavapai County, we collectively work with them on several different initiatives. One of them is they have a crisis team that responds. Cottonwood PD on this side of the mountain is the #1 government agency that requests their assistance out on a call for service where someone may have a drug issue and there may or may not be an arrest involved. Many times there's not, and it's kind of an intervention scenario where mobile crisis comes out. But even if it's absent, a scenario like that, they can certainly pick up that phone and call for help. And Gareth, do you know other resources other than?
And probably the largest and probably most well-known is MatForce. And that's a conglomeration of different agencies, both public and private, that work to reduce substance abuse throughout the country. And they've been phenomenal since their existence and recognized nationally for their efforts. But yeah, a lot of what we see and try to involve is the, I guess, the secondary members or people that are associated with people that abuse drugs. So we know it's not just the person that's abusing drugs that's affected. It's oftentimes their family members and friends and their support system, children. And so as much as we can, we try to get the word out that there are resources out there, MatForce being one, Spectrum being another, and a host of others that we try to encourage, because if they don't necessarily want to hear it from law enforcement, maybe it's their family or friends that can get them to that place of help.
Just to add a plug for MatForce, I sit on 2 of their subcommittees. We have an overdose fatality review board, believe it or not, one of the few in the country, that analyzes individual clinical cases on overdoses in the county. But MatForce is absolutely, like Gareth mentioned, is a model in drug prevention education, just to make sure our viewers know what they provide. They're not a service provider like Spectrum. However, if you did need referrals to resources like that, I'm sure MatForce would be able to handle that. But what a phenomenal, led by Marilee Fowler, what a phenomenal organization.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you for being here today. It sounds like we're ending on a low note, but we're not, because it goes back to inspiring a vibrant community and our police force being proactive. You guys have said several things today, everything from the neighborhood officer program, relationships being proactive, to the school resource officer, to PANT and MatForce and other programs. where you guys, you're not talking about just arresting people, you're talking about helping them get better and getting them the resources they need. Because as we've learned, people often in those places need assistance. And so we're not just out there with a hammer, we're there to help and make a better community. Gentlemen, thank you for being here, and this is the end of today's edition of Inside Cottonwood.